Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live. There's also a PayPal and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly though, if you would like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. And one last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Adam Meakin, Sleeping Warrior, Ranty, Mike, Earth Flattener, Daniel, Chocolate Saying, Arwin and Alan. Good to have you all.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Good morning, good morning.
Good afternoon.
Well, that was that was an interesting break.
Yeah, I ended the show, came back to total chaos with some guy shouting at you, demanding that we accept a diagram as a hypothesis. What was going on? It was like away for 2 minutes.
We'd concluded the point with Mike, I think, and then this idiot came on with a lovely reification fallacy model thing that has zero evidential value to it whatsoever, and he thinks it's self-explanatory proof of something. Well, I was quick to tell him that it wasn't proof of anything, and it had zero evidential value to it. He started getting
It doesn't work on your model. It doesn't work on your model.
Well, when I asked for evidence that supported his assertion or his hypothesis, as he called it, he didn't have any, and I had evidence to the contrary, but we didn't get to that point because he started becoming a little bit upset. And he ended up getting kicked. So shout out to Nathan for kicking out a moron.
I didn't kick him out.
No,
Triggered Globe is
Very
my favorite
easily
part of the
triggered.
show.
Yeah.
I just swore at him a lot.
I grabbed a screenshot of what he was presenting.
Come on, let's represent it and let's have a giggle.
There you go, it's on screen.
So this is what he was presenting as a hypothesis. He just said it's a diagram, it's a hypothesis. Fill your boots.
So basically what he was trying to say is that Polaris moves at a certain rate by virtue of the curvature of the Earth, right? And it's predictable. It's a static on their model. It moves at a set rate. I asked him, did he have any evidence that supported his assertion? And he hasn't got any. But I've got evidence that shows that this is not what happens because it appears to slow down. And Mick West even has to address this on his webpage. He calls it refraction. He says that the effects of refraction are most seen clearly at the horizon where all the stars appear to slow down, including Polaris. So the problem is if we live on a ball, that rate of drop in the night sky has got to be that 69 miles for every 1 degree of latitude travel. But it doesn't happen, does it? Because it slows, and it's slow. It's observable with the naked eye. But I bet you if you got some super precise trillions of dollars experimental equipment from NASA, they could do it very precisely and calculate exactly what the angle is to 10 decimal places, etc. And we could see that actually it starts way before the eye detects it or the mobile phone detects it. And that really does work against the idea that we live on a sphere because it has to be a constant if we're on a sphere, and it doesn't do it.
Nathan, do you want to tell him why it's not a hypothesis?
I tried to, but he got very angry with me, didn't I? I mean, we discussed this on the last show with Alan, asserting that the methodology we talk about is wrong somehow, but it isn't. That's just the scientific method. Independent variable, varied and manipulated to cause, if you've got it right, that is, the effect of your observed phenomena. That is science. So when you say something's a hypothesis, what I've just described is a hypothesis. A scientific prediction. It predicts your presumed cause and its effect on the dependent variable, your observed phenomena. That's a scientific prediction or a hypothesis. This ain't that.
So let's go back to Mike for a minute. Are you there, Mike?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
So I'm not professing or proclaiming that the guy that just joined has any qualifications in physics, but that's the standard of behavior, or not behavior, the standard of like narrative that we often get presented by people that are trained in physics. The rumpus will never ever concede any points. He'll never ever concede that sometimes there's evidence that goes against him, and he hasn't got an explanation for it without distorting the bands of science with regards to how light behaves in the atmosphere. Because we all know that light doesn't follow a curved path, but he has to push it. Now, there's no evidence that light follows a curved path in the atmosphere. Yeah, it does deviate from straight, but it ain't a curve. There's no curve to light, but Rumpus pushes it because it says so in the model. Things like that annoy me. Can you understand why I get annoyed with things like that? Or do you think that I should be more lenient with them because they're physics trained?
Well, on those points, I haven't got a physics degree, so I wouldn't know it either way. But I'm just comparing someone thinking they know something about the law, which you put them right, with someone in the same position but with a degree in physics, talking to someone who thinks they know something about physics.
Sure, but if Ranty called me on it and said that I'd got that wrong, I would be able to go to the code of conduct and bring out the exact page that states specifically that everybody's got the right to a fair trial. And that includes representation, right? I could actually do that, but can other physicists prove things like gravity when we point out to them that they can't prove it, but they start preaching it and explaining it and drawing diagrams and doing maths, and all we want is the proof. There's a difference between the two. I can support the position with something, but these guys only explain it or do it with maths, but they never prove it. So there's a difference, there's a disparity, and it's that disparity that I'm focusing on.
So do you think
these people can prove gravity?
So do you think there's something wrong with the way people get taught physics at, say, A-level or university then?
No, I think there's something wrong with the evidence that people present to be truth, yes. Have you looked into the distance to the sun by any chance, Mike?
No.
You should do, because you'll find zero evidence of any credibility whatsoever. The most current technology, according to the current science, is that they were able to bounce ping reflections from radar telescopes from Venus. And the current citation from it, or one of the leading citations from it, is Jodrell Bank in Nantwich. Are you familiar with Jodrell Bank?
No, but can I say, but your definition of the distance to the sun is there is no distance to the sun, which personally seems... Well, I don't understand that, to be honest.
Well, we haven't been able to find any evidence that proves the distance to the sun. So unless someone can show us how they've done this and where did they get this distance from the sun from? I mean, we do know where they got it from. It originated from a guy called Christian Huygens. Are you familiar with Christian Huygens?
I did listen to the hangout when, is it Jimmy brought him up the first time?
Yeah. So Christian Huygens assumed that Venus was the same size as Earth, which was based on an assumption itself that Eratosthenes assumed that we were on a sphere when he did his sticks in the ground observation and the Wells observation. He assumed that we were a sphere. Neil deGrasse Tyson states that, well, the maths does actually work out both ways. It does work out. But if you don't assume that we're on a sphere in the first place for Eratosthenes, and you don't assume that Venus is the same size as Earth, what does that then do to the maths for the distance to the sun?
I don't know. How am I supposed to know?
Well, come on, think about it. If you assume that if you have an assumption that's based on an assumption, you've got a 25% chance that you might actually be right. 75% chance that you're wrong. Still no evidence, though, that proves that you are right. Just probability. Come on, what does it do to your maths if you've got a 1 in 4 chance of being right?
So I didn't quite understand how you got to 1 in 4, but as I just pointed out, but you're sorry, I've got to take this.
Well, if you assume that Venus is the size of Earth, you're either right or you're wrong. So that's 50-50. Now, if you go with one of them, you then assume that the Earth is a sphere of a given size, according to Eratosthenes. But he assumed it were a sphere. So it may be a sphere or it may not be. So your 50-50 then becomes 25-25. So that's where you get your 1 in 4 from, your 25%.
But Tony, they've been using radar since 1961.
So
why are you using examples before that?
I just gave you well, I didn't finish my point with the radar. The Jodrell Bank telescope, the radio telescope at Jodrell Bank, I am unable to, even though I'm in academia at the minute, I cannot get access to the data that proves that there was ever a successful ping from, and I've got the dean of my university to try and get me in there, and I'm not getting there. They're not letting me in. They are literally ignoring me, right? Why would they do that?
What that is?
Body of science.
I wonder why they're doing that.
They can't ignore the dean though, can they? But they're ignoring her. I'm not getting access to it. Wonder why that might be. Wouldn't be dead proud to show one of the best achievements of mankind. Why would they not want to show this information? Do I have to get a court order to get access to this information, or can I call it bullshit because they don't seem to have it?
Bullshit.
I just like the idea that you're using examples from 1672, etc.
He's just using an example right now, saying that he can't get access to it.
I wonder why, though.
What do you mean you wonder why?
I wonder why as well. Why might that be, Alan? Wouldn't you think they'd be dead proud to present it because they were the leading cutting-edge technology at the time, and they calculated and proved it with ping reflections from Venus? Yeah. Why is it that I can't get hold of it? You tell me.
Yeah, I'm interested. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, I'm getting shut door after shut door. I've got the dean of my university involved to try and get me access to it, and they're ignoring her, literally ignoring her.
Are they the only people that's measured it?
Well, they're the only people I can get access to reasonably before summer. I can't fly across the world to the JPL telescope in some valley somewhere in the middle of America. So realistically speaking, yeah. Practically, no.
Got email.
Oh, yeah, and I'm trying that, and it doesn't work. I'm not getting the information that I want. I want to see the evidence that this ping reflection data actually exists. I want to see it. I want to see where they got it from. I want to see how they got it. I want to see the paper that they cited and published in their documentation with the evidence in it, not a graph. I want to see the evidence. I want to see that they got this little thing that they're telling us that they got. I want to see it.
Do you think you'd understand it?
Riley, you don't understand, man. You're ruffling feathers, man. The education system is the backbone of their indoctrination. So
of course
they don't want you asking the wrong questions, man.
Well,
yeah, be prepared to meet a whole lot more roadblocks than this.
To answer your question, Alan, do I think I'd understand it? Well, I know specifically what I'm looking for. So if I'm looking for a rabbit and they present me a rabbit, then I don't need to understand how the rabbit works. I just know that it's a rabbit. So I think I'm pretty much on the ball when it comes to the specific piece of evidence that I'm looking for that proves that this actually did happen.
What do you do if it's a hare?
I'd accept that it's still a rabbit. I'm not intelligent enough to understand the difference between the two in this context, am I? I couldn't tell you. Well, at least if they present something, right? It's not nothing. So, where's this body of science?
I've got a question for Alan. Just on what we were. I need your help, really, Alan, if you could, because we were talking about science and stuff, and I was just thinking in the break that definition was pretty rigid up until the 19th century, and it's only in the latter.
He's left.
He might just have a mobile connection or something. I know he does join on a mobile, so he might be back in a second.
No, he's gone.
I'll finish the point, and maybe I won't be back. Not maybe he can answer for us. So we've seen as what we now critique what's purported to be science, and that change that's happened in the latter half of the 20th century, particularly. And I just wondered whether Alan would consider that a good definition of hypernormalization, because he brought this word, didn't he, the other day?
I was going to say,
and it says,
if you can summarise what that word means, Adam.
The surreal state of a large stage communism in which semantic basis of consensus reality is absurdity. So, I'm reading it as it's where reality is based upon consensus, not actual. And that, to me, I was wondering whether it was a genuine question, because I was struggling to see where it fit, but that would seem an applicable case if that's what it is, where actually we've seen a hyper-normalization of something that isn't science to be defined and used in mainstream society as a science. And actually, when you do stuff like which contradicts it, it really does create this response where there is a strong feeling that this false definition is definition, and you fight against it, and that's because it's become hyper normalized. This situation where pseudoscience is accepted as science if it is given the title science.
Yeah, so let me just expand on that with regards to Mike. Mike, are you still there?
Yes.
You know, when you said, is there anything like, do you empathize with these people when the physicists and all this, and can you understand that these guys are trained and stuff, and they must look down on us in some respects because they must think that we're daft?
No, my question is, do you understand someone with education, say physics, talking to someone who isn't, and that person's coming up with a basic just like the example I gave you regarding law.
Sure. Well, let me give you an example where I'm not trained in physics and I don't profess to be, right? I do get stuff wrong. I do make mistakes and I deserve it when I get stuff wrong. We all do, right? Differences with my side, on our side, is we can admit it because we're learning, right? You guys can't, well, the ballers can't admit it, never will admit it, and never, ever, ever. Well, basically, they've just got this defiance disorder because they believe so strongly that their evidence is supreme. Now, I'm going to give you an example where physics, modern day physics, is giving us some evidence in science that they call scientific, and they say that this is a really good example of where the schools should all be teaching kids. So this is basically the replication of the Aristophanes experiment from different schools in 2015, I believe it was. Yeah, 2015. They got loads of schools, 20 institutions over 12 different countries, and they were all measuring the shadows caused by the sun on one particular day in and around the Mediterranean. And they were all trying to calculate the circumference of the Earth, reapplying the Aristophanes experiment. We all know the experiment. It's serious. It's proper. Everyone knows how strong it is. It proves that we live on a sphere. Right? Wrong. Look at what it says in this. It talks about the abstract. It talks about the introduction. It talks about what they did, how they did it, who did it, how many kids there were. Look at all the geometry that they're assuming here, a bit of R that they're assuming. But watch this. When we get down to the discussion part, right at the very end, right, this is where it bugs me with science, because whilst I take your point, these are the bits that really disturb me in terms of what's being taught in schools, because we have a problem. Under paragraph 4, it reads discussion. Inquiry-based hands-on experiments in classrooms require simple constructs to satisfy a student's curiosity. The ancient Aristophanes experiment, right, that's a contentious word, trigger word immediately, provides an excellent inquiry-based hands-on approach for today's students to conceptualize and solve, but not prove, an abstract problem that even contradicts everyday conceptions. We all know that the Earth is round, although it appears flat. So this paper is basically trying to recreate the Aristophanes experiment with current science of 2015, and it's all based on, well, we all know that the Earth's round. And they don't even say spherical, they say round. That's another trigger word. So when you say, do you empathize with these people? No, not at all, because these people are part of the problem. These people are pushing this education to cut, and these are passing it off as good. These things are supposed to be happening in schools. Well, this is nonsense. This is not proving the point. And they're calling it science. They're calling it an experiment. There's no experiment here. It's an observation and a measurement of a shadow. But there's no cause and effect relationship. There's no hypothesis. But they're telling you as though it is. They're making it sound dead credible. And I take offense to that, because people like Rumpus should be pointing out with the peer review process that this is not an experiment. That it doesn't prove a cause and effect relationship. It shouldn't be called an experiment. But do they speak up about it? No, they don't. Why is that? Is it because perhaps if they speak up about it, they get their wages taken off them? I reckon it is, because there's nobody in this room, there's nobody in the Flat Earth discussion that would accept that this is an experiment. It isn't. It's an observation and a recording of that observation, or perhaps a measurement. But it's definitely not a cause and effect relationship. It's definitely not an experiment. And this one is based on this concept. We all know the Earth is round, not spherical, round. So technically they're not really lying, because we say it's round as well, just flat. But it appears to be flat. I think it's disgusting. So no, I don't empathize with science. I think that they deserve all the flack that they get, because they can't prove their nonsense to be true. This is the problem. If they're going to go into physics and they think that they're going to be preaching a good word, it's right that we challenge them on their evidence, because what they tell us They can't prove, but they pass it off as though it's proof. It isn't. It's just science claiming to be science, but it isn't actually science. And people like the Rumpus don't call out this nonsense. They don't point out that this is not an experiment. And I want to know why. This is not an experiment, but nobody's going to call it out.
Riley, don't forget that one of the most popular astrophysicists, right, Mikio Kaku, says himself, and I know I said it before, but he said it himself. When science is studying cosmology, they're off. The level of mistakes could be 1 to the 120th degree. That's 1 with 120 zeros after that. So we're supposed to just trust science when that's the estimate that we're given? Bullshit. Sorry.
Whereas in contrast, if you asked me for the definition of theft in the UK law, I could reel it off the tip of my tongue. It's the dishonest appropriation of property belonging to another with the intention to permanently deprive. And if you said that I was lying, I could go to the statute book, I could pull it out, and I could say, there it is, it's Theft Act 1968, Section 1, and I could give you a lot of the cases that support the prosecutions that were to do with theft. But the same doesn't happen in science. So no, I don't have any sympathy or empathy, and that's why I've challenged a PhD level physicist he's a professor in a university. I won't say which one just yet. And on the 6th or might be the 8th of January next year, I'll be actually debating him in a televised, recorded. It's going to be recorded live, but presented later on. But it will be presented as live, because these guys can't prove their stories to be true, and that's what I'm doing. I'm challenging it because it's not true. Now, I'm doing it not from a physics background, but from an evidence background. And I can tell when they're making the point, if their point's supported by evidence or not. Sometimes it's a bit 50-50 and there's a debate there, it's moot. Sometimes it's 25 and 75. Sometimes it doesn't prove anything because it doesn't comply with the standard of proof. And these people are accountable. These people that are called physicists need to be accountable, because if I said that the definition of theft was wrong and I got it wrong, I'd be accountable for that. So why is it that science isn't accountable for the things that it doesn't get right? Why is it able to call things experiments when they're not actually experiments? They're not proving a cause and effect relationship. They're actually indoctrinating children that we live on they didn't call it a sphere, they said round. And everybody knows that it's round. Well, that's nonsense. We're being told lies. And these physicists that are asleep, red-pilled up, know all the stuff, but can't apply any of it. Because they're compartmentalized, they don't understand that things that need to be proved, and they're not proved. They just accept that it's proof and pass it on as though it's true. It's not.
Okay. I just noticed you either changed the word science and physics a fair amount in that conversation. Was that on purpose or just?
Well, science is very precise. It's narrow. Science is a method. Science is empirical based. It's not based on theology or like pseudoscience or
mathematics, for that matter.
Yeah, or philosophy. These like science is based on
expressed in mathematics, but it is by default not mathematical based. It's basically
it's an
independent variable, dependent variable. You don't have to use any kind of math language to do it.
Correct.
And that's very critical.
Whereas physics is very heavily dependent on mathematics. Sometimes they do have cause and effect relationships. Other times they don't. But how's anybody ever going to prove a cause and effect relationship for gravity? But it's all accepted. You've got to manipulate that independent variable. So if you're going to test for gravity, you've got to manipulate that gravity to prove that it is the thing that you're saying it is. Obviously, you can't manipulate gravity unless either you pull a planet closer because of Newtonian principles, or you got a little bit of space-time to bend. So unless you can demonstrate these things that you're claiming and prove and vary them and show the effect with the dependent variable, unless you can prove these things, these are not actually science. These are pseudoscience. These are stories. Yeah, they're based in logic, and it seems logical because everybody understands how gravity works. You've got to be a moron to think that gravity doesn't work. Yeah, it's deduction-based logic.
It's very specifically deduction-based. That's why the G is always tied onto everything. But even when they try to prove it, I guess, they put it in there as if it has already been established, basically. It's bizarre.
So let me ask you the same question. Do you empathize with physics or physicists when they see us talking the way we talk? Do you empathize with them when you see us attacking the fundamental basis of their work.
Of course,
Well-
it's terrifying.
Not you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, I empathise with your position when you asked that question about the law. So yeah, I would, I guess, because I do have some faith in the education system, I guess.
So you do empathise with our position. Sorry, you do empathise.
I empathise with someone who's got, let's say, education in whatever field, whether it be law or physics or chemistry or biology or whatever. Talking to someone doesn't who thinks they know something which may be basic to them. For example,
How about people that did gender
Hold on,
studies?
Owen. Hold on.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
well, for example, some flat earthers say that you should be able to feel 1,000 miles per hour, whereas you only feel acceleration as opposed to speed. That's just one example. Top of my head.
But one of the statements that I picked you up on earlier, and I was about to jump on you for it, was your sweeping statement that when these physicists see us talking about it and we're not educated or whatever, and they
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
You did say that.
I said physics. Someone in physics talking to someone, say a flat earther who hasn't got an education in that particular field.
Yeah, but you didn't say it that way. You generalised.
No. Well, okay, I'm saying it that way. I thought I said it this way. I'm saying it that way now. This way now. So yeah.
Right. I was just going to say, because Mr. Meekin on the panel here he has a postgraduate diploma in chemistry, and I have a postgraduate diploma in law.
Hold on. Every last one of us went to school on this panel, did we not? Anybody who didn't go to school on this panel?
I did, but I got better.
Right, so
I
every
think
single
there's a lot of-
one of us has had an education in the scientific method at school. So why would you assume that any of the people discussing this subject don't understand the scientific method when we were all taught it? So we do have an understanding of it if we all went to school.
The reality is there's a lot of what Mike's doing there is he's giving people who hold these fields extra power over his intelligence for no reason. We're not talking about the ability to analyze a particle physics paper. We're talking about the basic principles of what science defines itself as and a comprehension of that. And it doesn't require A levels, GCSEs. It doesn't require even going to school. It just requires you to be a sentient human being, be able to read the definition now and apply it logically to what you're then being told. And I don't think you should give away such power to people, Mike. Whether it's law.
Was there a reason why you asked that specific question?
Yeah, because I want to know if you. My question was, can you empathise with it? That's what I was asking, and you said no, which is fine. This is the answer.
I just add something here that before the first show, I was chatting with Anthony about his position with Nora, and I asked him a fairly carefully phrased question to establish whether or not it was an argument based on emotion or on facts. And he was quite categorical in his answer, and it was quite concise, and it led me to the certainty that he's only basing his arguments on the facts. So when you say, do you empathise? Well, this isn't an argument about feelings. Empathy doesn't come into it. Same with the judge, if you want to go back to the law example. Does the judge care if he has empathy for the person on the side? No. It doesn't come into it. It's not important. I don't care about their feelings. If they get their feelings hurt because they feel that they know all about this subject, and then we hand them their own arse in terms of the actual scientific method that they're not adhering to, tough luck. Sorry if you had your feelings hurt, Mr. PhD.
Exactly.
I remember something from school, because in physics class pretty early on, they did actually teach the scientific method. But then as soon as I learned that, I was like really impressed, like, finally, I'm really entering the circles of knowledge and science. Was very impressed. I believed in it. And then they basically stepped away from applying it. And it was like, why aren't we using the scientific method on this? Isn't that supposed to be what we're doing? I remember this. And they said, yeah, but no, it makes it too complicated and we're just going to stick to the curriculum. And I was really disappointed back then and kind of forgot about it. So odd, but they did teach it and then they just left it to the side.
But are we? At school, they teach us things gradually. They don't teach us everything when we're 12 years old or 13 years old.
No, I mean, some things you have to, you're expected to find out. For example, when they teach you about the heliocentric model, and it's implied that you live on a model, you later in life go out and find the definition of a reification fallacy falls into that exact definition of believing that you live in a world that the model represents, because you don't. That's a reification fallacy. But they're very explicit when they teach you that it's a model. They don't say the Earth is, they say the heliocentric model is. Now, for all those idiots who assert that that's the world we live in, then you're reifying a model. That's a fallacy. But, the education system doesn't tell you it's a reification fallacy to actually assume you live on that model, and that the model says what you should and shouldn't see when you go out and open your bloody eyes. People just do that because they're dumb and they haven't gone out and educated themselves on what a reification fallacy is. The map is not the terrain. We don't live on a model.
Right.
Do you know what I find most offensive? Just pushing your comment a little bit further, is that this topic, FE, is clearly contentious, right? There's arguments that goes both ways, and there is valid and legitimate opposing views that go against the official narrative.
What? Where?
Blame me.
Blame me.
Got him.
Got him too. Hey, Rumpus.
Hello.
So let me just finish before Rumpus pipes up. There is valid opposition, legitimate disagreement, evidence that's contrary to the official narrative. And that is not told to children in schools. Now, whether or not they preach or teach an alternative model is not what I'm saying. But what should be told is that this stuff's contentious and not everybody agrees that the sun is a ball of gas. It's got more attributes of a fluid than it does a gas. It doesn't have attributes of a gas that it should have if it's a gas. These are valid and legitimate complaints. So the fact that children are not told that it's contentious sweeps under the rug the contentious nature of what we're disagreeing over. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be the case that this is our best guess, but it is contentious. If you want to know more about it, go online and have a look and see what you can find. There's a lot of information out there and you have to work it out yourself, but this is our best guess. If I was told that at the age of 16, 15, 14, I may not have given a shit at that point, but I might have took on to it and thought maybe there's something else I can learn out there if I go and look into it.
Shout out to Flat Earth Data for the super chat. Thank you very much indeed.
And getting to the age of 36 before realizing that there's a valid, legitimate debate over what the sun is not really acceptable. We should have been told that it was contentious in school, and we're not getting told that. We're getting told that this is the way it is. There's nothing else out there to learn, and we know what we're talking about. Well,
Tony. So I can't remember being taught about the sun at school, but I do remember being taught about mechanics, Newtonian mechanics. But I wasn't told that doesn't work at a small scale till you start learning about quantum mechanics much later. I don't think I even did that at school. So the way the education system works, you get taught something for the age you are. And then, for example, Newtonian mechanics, that works all the time, they tell us. But when you get older and you specialize in, say, quantum mechanics, say, they'll tell you then, as I understand it, Newtonian mechanics fails when you're talking about electrons and small particles like that.
Not contentious at all. We understand the sun very well. Well, actually, not very well, but we understand what it's made of. We understand that it's made of various gases.
Is it a gas or a liquid, Rumpus?
It's a gas.
And how do you know that?
Because of observations of it. We can measure spectroscopy. From spectroscopy, we can analyse what it's made of and determine That's how we discovered helium, for a start.
So if I see somebody in a bikini with a pair of boobs in a swimming pool, but I can't quite tell whether they're male or female, but I deduce from the fact that I'm seeing boobs in a bikini, does that prove that they're female?
Well, you're starting to talk about how you prove things. You can only prove things in maths.
Yeah, spectroscopy is not exactly reliable, Rumpus.
Absolutely reliable.
No, you can't physically confirm it.
Yes, we can.
Correct.
No, you can't. You can only confirm it when you actually have the material and applying it to that.
Correct.
Could you just give an answer to Anthony's question with his example, Rumpus? So he said, if you're in a pool and you're looking at a person in a bikini with breasts, can you ascertain whether or not they are male and female by looking at them?
No, I suppose not.
So how is that any different to having a look at the stars?
Well, because we can determine the material something's made of.
And you can determine whether or not she's got a cock. So, can you determine whether or not she's got a cock?
Well, you've got to decide what female means. If you mean it's got an XY chromosome, you even get women sometimes have an XY chromosome. So that's a problem. You've got to decide
so
what
there's
female
even
and
more
male
problems.
means for a start.
So there's even more problems to it. So there's other layers. Wow, I hadn't even considered that.
Yeah,
Wow,
but
that makes
easier.
that makes the
easier with
stars. That makes looking at the stars seem even more futile, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, because there's a clear-cut relationship between the spectroscopy of an object, such as the sun, which is sending off all these lovely colours that we can analyse, to what's inside it. So it's very much clearer in the case of the sun than it is about a woman in a bikini. We're going to be much more sure about the sun than we can about a bikini.
Yeah.
Oh, really? So the woman in the bikini, you make your little guess, you have a little look. You know what you can do next, Rumpus? You can go over and you can have a little conversation. You might even end up in bed with her.
Well, we've got to decide what female means. If you mean it's XY chromosome...
I'm trying to draw the comparison that you can go and have a little check with the example that we're giving. Can you go and have a little check with the sun?
Yeah, we
really?
identify this. What
so you've been and had a check? Sorry, you've just said yes. You've answered in the affirmative. Who has been to check on what the sun is made of?
You don't touch it to identify what it's made of.
Sorry, has somebody been to check? You can't touch it. So that would be a no then, wouldn't it? So unlike the example of the woman that you also don't know and you can only look at after the fact, once you've made your decision, based on vision only, you can go and check the woman in the pool. You can't go and check the sun because apparently we can't go and touch it. So that's a no then. That's a no. That's a no, Rumpus.
It's much easier to draw a conclusion from a deduction than actually confirm it. That's true, Rumpus.
We have evidence using established scientific verified techniques of how to determine the constituents of something from its spectroscopy, and that goes to the sun.
Scientific,
everything
you say?
About the sun confirms
so is it,
that.
It's a prediction, is it?
It's mass, et cetera, et cetera.
Sorry, you said science, Rumpus, so it's a scientific prediction then?
Scientific prediction?
You seem
if
to be
you
mumbling.
mean that we have tests of spectroscopy in the lab.
Yes, tests. Yes, I heard you correctly then. So a scientific test, that would be an experiment, wouldn't it, Rumpus?
Well, it's an observation in the case of...
No. That would be step one in the scientific method. We were talking about tests. And in science, tests are experiments. Aren't they, Rumpus?
No, observations. That's because you don't...
No, that would be step one. Tests are not observations, Rumpus. That's entirely my point. So, Rumpus, let's try that again. If we're talking about tests, we are talking about experiments, not observations.
Observations. Science includes observations, Nathan.
Yeah, that would be step one in the scientific method. Step one, observe a phenomena. Yeah? So it's part of the scientific method, but it's not the experiment. It's step one. The experiment comes much later.
You're talking about experiments.
Yes, scientific tests based on scientific predictions, otherwise known as hypothesis. You said we've got science. So
no, observations science, Nathan.
Yes, step one, we keep going around in circles. Do it again and I'll kick you out. We have established firmly that yes, observation of phenomena is step one in the scientific method. That will be followed by a prediction, otherwise known as a hypothesis, and that will be backed, because it's an assumption of a cause, doesn't actually prove the cause, it'll be backed by systematic experimentation. Now that experimentation in science is a test.
The definition you use of science includes observations.
Yes, that's correct. Step one for the third time. I am going to now kick you out because you are a circle-jerking wanker. Yes, that's correct, Rumpus. Step one, observe a phenomena. So asserting that it's part of it when I'm trying to tie you down to the test you think you've got, then we'll get the hypothesis that it's based on, because experiments are hypothesis tests. But you don't want to link those two things, don't you? You want to call a test something that's just based on an observation without the scientific prediction in between. So you're leaving out a step in the scientific method, Rumpus. We did it 3 times. Now you can go away. Don't waste my time.
So, Mike, are you there?
Yes, I think I am.
You've just had a demonstration where a guy with a physics degree professes to be some kind of like guru, some kind of leading authority, and he's missing out a key stage of the scientific method. In response to your question, do you have empathy for these people? And I said no. Would you disagree with me based on what you've just seen?
Well, I'm not sure I would say that spectroscopy is a invalid method. It's what you said in this conversation.
It's not science.
spectroscopy is not science.
Correct.
No. Did you not listen to a word I just said?
No, Anthony said that spectroscopy was invalid. It has problems or faults. That's what you said.
It's not science.
It's not science.
I got a crackling clear moon outside, by the way.
I've got you up, Owen. It looks nice. So yes, that's correct. Spectroscopy is not science. It's not establishing any cause of anything. It only has step 1 in the scientific method, observation of phenomena. So they're having a little look of it. And then when we say, okay, well, next step in the scientific method is to presume a cause of the effect, and then go forth to establish if it is actually the cause of that effect or not. That would be the scientific method. Now, the middle step, the hypothesis step, is the bit that Rumpus wanted to sidestep and claimed that you only need to observe things, which is what the pseudoscience of astrophysics does. So astrophysicists have a little look at something and then they draw a conclusion. That is not the scientific method. That's called a mystic Meg prediction, as opposed to a scientific prediction, which would be called a hypothesis.
So when Rumpus comes in and he makes assertions about what the sun is, and we ask him, well, how do you know? And then he starts talking about something that's not science, but he presents it as though it is science, and people like yourself believe perhaps that it was actually scientific, but we were being pedantic. What we're actually doing is pointing out that this stuff's not actually science. Now, it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with what I just said. My point is that it did not comply with the scientific method, but Rumpus promotes it and supports it as though it is science. And I say that that's false. Now, whether you agree or not is not what I'm asking, but can you at least see the reason why we attack?
Not at this moment in time. That's the honest answer.
I'll try once more, Anthony. So there's an established method, Mike. It's called the scientific method. Yep. And what Rumpus has just done is left out a very key step and yet still claimed it's science. Now, by definition, that makes what he is doing pseudoscience, outside of science, because he's missed a very key step. The step that establishes the independent and dependent variable relationship. That would be called a scientific hypothesis, otherwise known as a scientific prediction.
Can you now see why it's an issue?
He's not establishing a cause and effect relationship.
Right,
Yeah.
and he's calling it science. But he's calling it science. So science is pretty narrow, but he's calling something that does establish cause science. So it gives it weight, like it's actually proven something. And it hasn't. It's just looking at something and drawing a conclusion. Maybe do a bit of maths in between to make it seem more legit. But it's not science. That's the point. And when they claim it's science, as Rumpus has just done, we get pretty ticked off with him. Especially when I point that out to him and he continually asserts that observation is part of science. Yeah, we don't want partial science. We want an adherence to the scientific method. And he hasn't got that. But he still keeps calling it science, which is an outrage, Mike. That's what we're pointing out. And you're asking, should we empathise because he's got a degree? No. What I'll do is point out where he's wrong.
But it goes further than that, Nathan. It's when we point out to Mike that we've clearly demonstrated the issue with what we say is the reason why there's no empathy. And then we ask him, does he at least see the point that we're making? And he says no. And I'm like, come on, Mike. We've just demonstrated that someone right on cue has come in, done exactly what we say that they shouldn't be doing. And now you don't see that what's just happened is exactly the point that we're making. And now you don't seem to see it. What's going on? Come on.
That is incredible. Hey, Mike. Do you
Hello?
Do you think it's easier to figure out what the sex of another person is over what a star like the sun is?
Well, if you don't include spectroscopy, then
Yes or
depends
no?
what you're.
It's easier to figure out what the sex of another person is
From
over
afar.
what the sun is.
From a distance. That's what the initial argument was.
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. A person on Earth versus the sun. Which one is easier to figure out?
Well, obviously you can do a blood test on the person. So yeah, it'd be easy to figure out.
Okay.
So
Well, the Rumpus is making an argument that it's easier to figure out the sun regardless of anything else because he has to do that.
Because it has to be.
Yeah, they've already got a narrative for what it is. So for him to admit that the narrative's based on utter nonsense, non-scientific, pseudoscience, mystic meg predictions, then it doesn't give him much credibility when the narrative is that this is figured out. They do know what the sun is. So he has to assert that, in the face of us pointing out contradictions, errors, holes, and examples that parallel it, where he claims it's easier to figure out the sun than it is to figure out if a woman sat in a bikini in a pool is a woman or not. Apparently the sun's easier to figure out. Science, right? Apparently, until you pick it apart and find out there is no scientific method being applied.
So let me ask the question again, because I know you did answer it, but I'm going to invite you to change your mind. Whether or not you agree with the point we made or not, can you at least see that by pointing out that this is not actually science is a valid complaint against people in physics claiming that this is science when it's actually not?
I still don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean,
the answer is no, this is not science. They shouldn't be doing it. That's the answer.
Could I add a point from the mainstream that kind of underlies what Andy's kind of saying? There's been some stuff in the flat Earth this week. There's I think he's French, certainly a French name physicist, coming out, and it's quite fun because it relates to the spectroscopy of the sun. And as he's putting out, and you'll have to excuse my ignorance here because my understanding of spectroscopy is lab based, not astrophysics. But it's basically that a body like the sun is what they're measuring is a full spectrum given by this body, and apparently that's impossible given their physics from the sun if the sun is a gaseous body, because it needs to have non-gaseous components to create this level of full spectrum emission, I think is it summarized. And so for me, you know, the mainstream, the debate's there, but what I think Andy's kind of saying is, look, these guys are preaching not even science, they're preaching a doctrine, and they're rigid in that doctrine.
so you've done chemistry. So as I understand it, spectroscopy is used a lot in chemistry, right?
Yeah.
To identify compounds.
That's not science, technology, isn't it? It's a piece of technology I'm using. I'm not doing science when I use the equipment.
But you are identifying the compound, and you have faith in that identification.
That's not science. I'm using a piece of technology.
But you do have faith in the answer you get.
Well, it's deduction based, and it works out.
Yeah, I've got no problem with using the answer. Whether how I apply the answer.
Hold on, sorry a second. Sorry, Adam. Sorry, can you just ask your question again, Mike?
Sorry?
Can you ask your question again, please?
You want me to ask the question again?
Yeah, your last question. Can you just repeat it?
I asked, you use spectroscopy in chemistry. He said yes. Then I asked, what did I ask? I asked, do you use it to identify compounds?
You said, does he have
and
faith?
He said yes.
Does he have faith in the answer?
Yes, in the answer. So you get an answer from doing spectroscopy in compounds to identify them. You get an answer. You have faith in that answer.
Yeah. So science isn't faith-based. So it doesn't. It matters. It matters not. Yeah. Go. Sorry, Adam. I'm cutting you off. You go ahead.
This would be the point. Yeah. I mean, this is why we're a good way of explaining it is it isn't doing science. It's using technology because. You know, no, I don't have faith, but with all equipment, I have a confidence interval that it operates within. So I have a level of assurity that what the machine is telling me is true, but that isn't science.
It has been trial and error based, and the percentage of error has been basically marked down with that device, correct, Adam?
Yeah. But science isn't that. That isn't science.
No, but it's statistics. Exactly, it's statistics, but it is deemed very reliable.
I'm not happy to use it. Yes, but that isn't anything to do with science.
Okay, that's my answer to my question. Thank you.
It's practical. It's not science.
Okay, great. So
there may have been some science done that led to the development of that piece of equipment, that piece of technology. There may be some scientific principles behind it, some scientific experiments that allow us to put together certain principles that we believe in and have faith or know a scientific fact, but we put it together to build that machine. But using and operating the machine is using and operating the machine.
So let me just interrupt there, just to read this citation.
Just before you do, Anthony. Sorry, I just want to get one more word in, then I'll put your citation up. So it seems like you've conceded, Mike, that using technology is not science. You seem to have conceded that quite happily.
By the definition of science, I guess, yeah.
Right. So by definition, we have scientists claiming they are purveyors of science when they are not.
Because they use technology like spectroscopy.
Correct.
So,
Nathan,
hold on. It's concession and conclusion time, Mike. So your original, this whole discussion is hinged around, should we empathise with the purveyors of a lie? It's not science, and they continually assert that it is in the face of the objections you have conceded to. Mike, should we empathise with liars?
Whilst he's considering that
answer. No, I want an answer.
Well, we shouldn't empathise with liars, no.
There's your answer. No, we should not empathise with them, Mike, because they are liars. They assert that they have science when they don't. I hope that answers your question.
And just let me just add to that. This is important. Let me just put my screen on, Nath. I'll read from it whilst you're putting it on.
You're up.
What science is not. Part 3, science is not technology. And this is cited from the geology department of the University of Georgia. It says, one of the mistakes that many people make in thinking about science is to confuse it with technology. As a result, science often receives undue credit for the miracles of modern science in one's kitchen, or undue blame for everything from overly firm tomatoes to nuclear war. In fact, science doesn't make things. Scientists developed the understanding of radiation sufficient for the invention of the microwave oven, but neither making a microwave oven nor using it are science. Scientists are in the business of generating knowledge, whereas engineers are in the business of generating technology. People doing science often use sophisticated technology, perhaps spectroscopy, but science doesn't require it. Our ecologist observing natural bird behavior and our geologist examining an outcrop neither use particularly sophisticated technology. In fact, the only technology common to all science is the notebook in which the observation is recorded. In short, science often leads to technology, and it is often using technology, but it isn't technology. And in fact, it can operate quite independently of technology. So using spectroscopy and claiming it as science, at least according to this citation from the University of Georgia, isn't science. I'm done.
Well done.
And with that, I'm going to say first and foremost a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the debating panel for making this debate possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you, the live audience, for tuning in and hopefully sharing this debate. If you hated the show, then smash the dislike button, but then smash it again. If you like the show, maybe consider sharing it with a friend or subscribing if you've not done so already. Over on my second channel, which is Nathan Oakley channel, there is the pre-show about to broadcast in about 5 minutes time, so I'll stick a link in the chat box as the end credits roll. Once again, I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!